So where are you coming from right now, Chris?
I am in Brooklyn, New York.
All right.
Yeah.
I think our last couple of guests were from New York.
Who was the last guest?
Charles Bermesco.
Oh yeah, the movie writer. Yeah, I like that guy.
Mhm.
I follow him.
Yeah, he's really good on Twitter too.
Yeah, he's very good at it. I love when he reviews something that, he just knows he's going to get fucking hammered for.
Mhm.
And
That's always special.
like that Sound of Freedom movie that just came out or whatever. So
Oh yeah.
that pedophile hunting movie or whatever. He's just got fucking hammered for that, I think. So
Yeah, I shared that
Yeah.
with Tony. I saw some screenshots of just pages of QAnon people being like, "Oh, so you love child sex rings then, huh?"
that's so awesome, dude.
Jesus.
It's like you can't win with these people. They're psychopaths, but so are people who are just like mad about female Ghostbusters. You know what I mean? Or like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or like Marvel people or shit like that,
The Sound of Freedom people have been some of my favorite though, because they're simultaneously thrilled to have like this hit movie that's raking in all this cash at the box office, but then they also won't miss an opportunity to feel victimized by the fact that they think like the theater chains are conspiring to censor it and prevent it from being shown. And either no one is allowed to see the movie, or it's making $1 zillion. You really should pick one, but they get to have both.
You got to pick one. Or like the ones I've seen where people are like complaining like, oh, the AC was off and the lights were on. I was like, that just sounds like going to a fucking AMC, dude.
Yeah.
Like
They probably haven't been to a movie theater in like 10 years.
yeah.
You're
So
right.
like you show up, like God's Dead 1 came out like fucking 8 years ago or whatever. That's the last time they went. So like
Yeah.
it's like fucking Christ, dude.
Yeah.
So I see these things and I'm like, yeah, that sounds literally like going to a Regal or a fucking Cinemark or you know what I mean?
It's
or
like
any of these big chains.
It's like complaining that the ice cream machine is broken at McDonald's or something.
Right. Like,
just like, yeah, that sounds right. No, I'm not going to get my vanilla with fucking hot fudge syrup. Of course I'm not.
Yeah, and they have a bunch of kids working there. What's going on?
yeah, they're being trafficked. But, like, why is the popcorn more expensive than it was 10 years ago the last time I was at a movie? This is a conspiracy.
This must be some George Soros shit.
Mhm.
So let's keep all that because that sounds like fucking, we're just going to get murdered on the internet.
We could use the views, honestly, even if we do attract these psychos. We'll just make sure we only give them Seth's address, so no worries.
Yeah.
I can get murdered. It'll be viral.
We could use the exposure of 100 people calling us pedophiles.
Yes. I know who killed Seth.
Hello and welcome to Unwatchables, the film podcast where we take the good, we take the bad, we take them both, and there we have some fucked up shit. I'm Marc Dottavio.
I'm Seth Troyer.
And today we are joined by author and visual artist Christopher Norris to help us figure out exactly what happened to Lindsay Lohan, the former child star and teen idol from films like The Parent Trap, Freaky Friday, and Mean Girls, seemed on her way to working with legendary directors like Robert Altman. Instead, her career took some strange turns before fizzling out of Hollywood altogether. We are here to talk about two of the most unwatchable examples, 2007's horror fiasco, I Know Who Killed Me, and Paul Schrader's 2013 erotic thriller, The Canyons. So here to help us figure out
Let's get mean.
who killed who is Christopher Norris. You might know him as Steak Mtn, the visual artist behind album covers for bands like Against Me and Orchid, among many others, or from fronting the 90s hardcore band Combatwoundedveteran. He's also a novelist, starting with his experimental horror novel Hunchback 88, and his new book, The Holy Day, is out October 11th on Rose Books. It is described as a novel about a former teen detective going on vacation to die.
I wanted to read that plot synopsis.
Sorry. You can do it and we can dub it in later.
Okay.
That's it. That's all the information I have on this book is that line, and that's really enough to get me interested.
And
that's
I've been
good.
really interested in Hunchback 88 ever since John told me about it. And I remember seeing some I feel like it was some apocalypse party people talking about it or something online.
Yeah.
Which
Ben,
that's a
Ben,
whole other publishing house that I love of that kind
yeah.
of just transgressive, anything goes kind of punk publishing house. And yeah, I think I would really love your book. I'm really looking forward to tracking it down.
The Hunchback is just got a new distributor called Asterism Books, and they've taken on the whole entire Inside the Castle catalog, so it's pretty available these days, actually. And so one of the authors for Apocalypse Party is Maggie Siebert or Siebert, depending, and she wrote Bonding, and she has a short story in the Hunchback reissue that is widely available, and it's really good. It's actually better than the whole entire Hunchback 88. It's worth the money just to get it for that. She really fucking nailed it to the wall. She's an incredible author. But yeah, like you said, I have a new book coming out, The Holy Day, on Rose Books, and it is a new press started by author Chelsea Hodson, who, like I said, she's an author in her own right. She's just a genius, and she was smart enough to decide to start an imprint, a small press of her own. First book out is going to be Jeff Rickley's Someone Who Isn't Me. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jeff, but Jeff is in the band Thursday. He's the vocalist for the band Thursday.
Whoa.
And his book comes out next week on July 25th. It's very good. Everybody should visit rosebooks.co and order his, and then pre-order mine, because why not? Mine is out. Actually, mine's out not on the 11th, but it's actually out on the 10th of October.
Oh, damn it. Who does our research around here?
No, it's all good. It's one day. Who cares? But yeah, and like you said, it's a novel about a former teen detective going on vacation to die. I really like Nancy Drew. If I always say that if I'd ever got a chance to make a movie for a major studio, I just try to pick the one who has the rights to Nancy Drew and make a good Nancy Drew movie for once. So it's not a Nancy Drew novel, obviously, but it's that idea of a former teen detective, who gets called up for one last case, but she's now in her mid 50s to go look for a missing niece. And well, it doesn't go well for her. But that's all I'll tell you, because maybe it's pretty simple as that. Maybe it's not, I don't know, but I think it's really good. And you'll never, ever fucking hear me say that about anything I do. So hopefully it really is.
Oh yeah. No.
Well, I know from what I've heard about Hunchback 88, it sounded like it kind of involved different screenplays that you were working on, and sounds like a pretty experimental kind of approach. Is this book similar to that, or is this more?
It's a little cleaner.
Okay.
It's a little cleaner. It's a little bit more focused. There is an experimental element to it, but Hunchback 88, I always kind of relate back to, I'm probably a little older than you guys by maybe a decade or so. But when I was a kid and I was buying bootlegs and, fucking from Video Search in Miami or, different places that you could buy 8th generation copies of a Laserdisc dub of Fulci's The Beyond or something. Usually when I would get these tapes, these bootlegs, at the end of them, they would always just be a sizzle reel of fucked up gore or weird shit or a midget dancing or, you know what I mean? Or just stuff like that. A woman fucking a pig, whatever. So I always really liked that. And I had a job where when I moved back to New York from San Francisco in 2012, that I could just fuck around and do nothing at. They wanted me there from 8 to 5 every day. That's it. Monday through Friday. I barely did anything. They told me, yeah, do your stupid little Steak Mtn art, watch movies. We just want you here if we need you. It was actually the most ideal New York City job ever.
Sounds great.
So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to try fucking around and I'd kind of started some screenplays here and there because I had worked in production in San Francisco from 2009 to 2012. Production is in quotes because I worked in pornography at a place called kink.com. And so I had experimented with, fucked around with seeing if I could write a script. I love movies. I've loved movies forever. Maybe you guys are like me and you watch upwards of 200 to 300 movies a year. It's how
And
my
porn.
life has always
so
been.
thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. So, but I'd never really tried to really write a script. So I wrote a couple and was like, I'll never make these, but maybe I'll turn it into a book. So I started chopping it up and rewriting it and condensing it. And it came out as a Hunchback 88, and it was originally put out by Permanent Sleep Press, which is a Toronto-based small press imprint run by a guy named Matt Finner. And, it was just kind of a lark. We just put it out, sold a couple hundred, and then he didn't reprint it, which is fine by me because I kind of like the idea of it going, scarce. But then John at Inside the Castle, was a fan, and he was like, do you ever think about maybe putting it in my hands? And I was like, well, we could, but I'd love to do a bunch of extra stuff. So I hired a bunch of other artists and got some writers in there to do some like inspired by pieces of Hunchback 88, like Chris Zeischig, who actually is in the Canyons for a second. And
Oh, whoa.
yeah. And so with The Holy Day, it also started as a script, but I actually just retained one script, not 3 scripts in a fucking blender like Hunchback was. And I've been pretty much writing it for about 4 or 5 years. And then Chelsea came around and was like, I'm doing this thing. What do you got? So I showed it to her and she was really enthusiastic, which was good for my ego because she's somebody whose taste I trust. And here we are, so that's the long way about it.
Inside the Castle is amazing. That's just so exciting. And just to like folks on the podcast who like, I don't know, maybe you don't read or something, you're just into like fucked up movies and stuff, like it just to alert you, there is such a like revolution of like fucked up experimental publishing houses like what you're a part of, and Hunchback 88, like Derek McCormick, all these people right now, and like all this like what seems to me to be like kind of post Dennis Cooper kind of thing, like this. Like,
he's our grandfather for sure
of literature, like
the
punk rock of literature is like really, really happening. But even more than that, it's like really, really intense stuff, and I just been loving it the last like 5 years or so.
Yeah, we're definitely in like a very interesting moment for that kind of let's just say non-traditional freeform writing, so yeah, Amphetamine Sulfate, Apocalypse Party, 1111 Press, now with Rose Books, and Inside the Castle. Yeah, there's a lot of cool shit happening. There's a lot of cool writers. I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of junk, but that happens in any kind of wave of enthusiasm. Sometimes it doesn't even matter if it's junk. It's just exciting that there's people writing and doing and fucking around and trying things out, and that's cool to me. Most of the time I don't feel like it needs to be good. You know what I mean? It's cool if it is, but it's cooler if people are just trying. It's kind of like early punk, you know what I mean? Like you fucking couldn't catch me fucking anywhere listening to a new punk record in my life, but if you go back to early punk or early hardcore, that stuff's really exciting, because they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. It's like just fumbling in the dark, and it's very cool. So
yeah,
I mean, early rock and roll is like that,
making it and stuff,
No, none of us have any fucking chance of making it. So it's and that's fine.
Which just breeds good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Or it breeds
on that
honest
subject,
stuff, So
yeah. On that subject, like though, you do have your toe in a little bit, and I know like it's probably the thing you get asked a lot about is you're involved with Against Me as far as their like album artwork. I mean, not that Against Me is like Big Time Rush or something, but
sure.
That's amazing. I love your artwork and everything.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and they have had a massive impact on my life, obviously. I don't really necessarily, I haven't done anything for them in a long time, but they're also like not really a band anymore, so, or they're on hold. So, or that's my understanding. Truthfully speaking, I don't really talk to anybody in the band that much anymore. So, but who knows if they ever dust themselves off, I might be doing art again, but I appreciate you saying that. I don't love it, but I understand that I'm in the minority for a lot of it because it does mean so much to people and people love that band so much that I could be diplomatic about it. It's cool, so
Yeah, it's more, personally it's more nostalgic for me. Like,
sure,
it's
absolutely.
like, I had a girlfriend in high school who, like, that was one of the first like punk things she showed me, because I was still in this, like, if it doesn't have like prog rock involved, I don't know what the point is or something, phase of my life.
Sure,
but yeah,
sure.
It was important for that. And yeah, you just have like great art on like a bunch of different bands. I love your style. Yeah.
Thanks. It's definitely just born of being excited about photocopy machines, although my background is, I didn't go to college, but I'm trained as a fine artist. I went to like a magnet school. I have always been drawing or doing some sort of fucking dumb creative visual thing. So yeah, I've worked for a lot of bands, all kind of in the same realm for the most part. But it's given me a lot of cool opportunities, so like no one would have probably really wanted to put out Hunchback Idiot if I wasn't in Combat or Reversal of Man or Did Against Me art. And maybe Matt would, but my connection to him was hardcore because he's a hardcore kid. So he knew me. I was something quantifiable to him that he understood. Like, I was an idiot who screamed in basements. You know what I mean? So
people love those kind of people.
Yes, they do.
We love those kind of people.
Yeah, and, I mean, it's it's 20 plus years on for me, but I know that I'll just be like a footnote of that forever, and that's totally fine with me because it was a fun time to be, it was fun time to do shit. It's memories that I like, so I talk shit occasionally about it, but realistically speaking, like, I'm like, yeah, it was cool, man. So, and we're reissuing all the Combat records on vinyl.
Cool.
On a label called Dark Operative, which is a San Diego label run by Brent Eyestone, who used to run Magic Bullet. First up will be Combatwoundedveterans. I Know a Girl Who Develops Crime Scene Photos reissue, all new artwork. I redesigned the whole thing.
Such a good title.
Thanks. We really did work. Paunch, who was in that band with me.
I had to assume.
Yeah, no, we worked with a girl at Taco Bell who her side job was developing crime scene photos. So when it was time to name the LP in 1999, we were like, let's call it that, There we go. So there's the
Did you get to do any, is there any visual art element that you did as far as with the novel coming out? Did you do like a cover or anything for it? Or
Yeah, I designed the cover and some of the artwork. There's like pieces of paper and notes in the new thing that I did, but I also, this book, I kind of toned it down on who I asked to do artwork, but I got my friend Sammy Harcum, who's a great cartoonist. If anybody's out there who likes comic books, his Blood of the Virgin graphic novel is fucking incredible. And Johnny Ryan, who is a pretty well-known cartoonist, he did something. And this guy B. Tom Stevenson, who's a fine artist, who's awesome. And then this guy named Mike Diana, who's a Florida guy who used to do this comic called Boiled Angel in the late 80s and early 90s in Tampa, Florida, and he was arrested on obscenity. It was like a huge deal. You should look him up if you don't know him.
Florida.
Yeah, so Florida. So I wanted to put him in there because this takes place in like 90s Florida, so it was important for me to have Mike in there, and it was like pretty exciting that he accepted. I mean, anybody will accept when there's money involved, but I was just excited that he said yes, even if I paid him money for it, So yeah, but I did a couple things, and obviously like the general overall design, the idea of how the book operates is mine, you know what I mean? So yeah, I did some stuff for it, but
cool. And do I understand, and we can cut this out, this is a spoiler or something, but is there some sort of reference to Lindsay Lohan in this book?
There's not a reference to Lindsay Lohan in this book, but I Know Who Killed Me is a very important influence on The Holy Day.
Okay.
I have like 21 movies that I recently posted about, like, that are like massive influences on the book, because like this is like one of those things. I'm not a huge reader. I like books, I read, but movies are what I love the most. And that's what I spend my time on. If I could watch 4 movies rather than spend a day reading, I'll watch 4 movies. There are authors that have influenced me, and there are books that I'm going to post about that are hugely influential on me as a writer, but also on the holy day. But movies are my thing. It's so I Know Who Killed Me is just, there's something about it. There's, just, she's not referenced directly, but just I used it, it was influential on me. There's just, I didn't crib anything from I Know Who Killed Me, but it kicked a dent in me in 2007 just because of how odd it is. But we'll get to that, obviously.
All right.
Actually,
well, that's a great.
since that's where we're at, right? So
yeah, that's a good transition then into this.
Yeah. And you also wanted to do it because you agree with me that I think Lindsay Lohan should front a hardcore band. I think.
Yeah, of course. Can you imagine what her like in between song banter would be like? It'd be so sick.
Oh God.
With that raspy ass voice, dude. Oh she'd be
yeah.
so mad, She'd be
And
like, "Wow, this next one, you losers, I want you to mosh." You know what I mean? It'd be so awesome. Let's fucking tear that pit up.
All right. Well, that kind of helps answer the question too about, why we're even doing this episode. Because I was a little skeptical when Seth brought up this idea.
It is mainly just because idea that I had, Marc.
Yeah, always. And I guess I just was making sure that, okay, is this going to be a, podcast in 2023 that is going to be, kind of punching down backwards to this, girl whose career kind of cratered at a certain point with all of the addiction issues and the tabloid culture and kind of that early 2000s, like Britney Spears kind of way where everyone was making fun of her. And I just wanted to make sure we were coming from a place of, genuine curiosity and appreciation, which it sounds, Chris, that is where you're coming from, at least when it comes to this movie.
I love both of these movies. I am not looking to fucking put a boot print on either of these movies' faces. I love both of these movies. So I'm a fan.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big fear with this episode too, which was just like, we do not want to be like, oh, this dumb drunk girl, that is not at all where this is coming from. Like, I think it is just like it's coming from a place of just like, I am very interested in just weird intersections and weird choices and like the weird places some actors find themselves in like bizarre projects. And I think it's like, to Lindsay's credit, that Lindsay was doing these sort of kind of out there ideas even when her career was kind of like in a odd place. It was not like the safest bets. These are not the safest bets at all. And they were like, it showed in the end a bit financially for those who were involved, but I don't know. I think a lot of it is to her credit.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I Know Who Killed Me she's really fucking good in it. All right. So to me, she's not a bad actress. And when it's such a subtle thing, but when she's just Aubrey, the normal girl, because I guess whoever's going to listen to this, just fucking spoiler alert, you know what I mean? Because, we're talking about the movie, so
it's fine.
Watch this shit before you listen to this. But when she switches to Dakota, that subtle, it's really like, it's like a tacky version of a bad girl, but it actually plays. And she's energetic and she's aggressive and she's trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. I mean, it's a great mystery. Now, it gets, the basic conceit is very Argento-esque, where you're just like, oh, so there's like a twin stigmata, like the idea that like, that like if her twin loses a limb, she loses a limb via necrosis, like.
Yes.
Which in 2007, you would go to ask.com, by the way, to find out information on twin stigmata.
Oh my God. That was one of my favorite scenes where we're watching Lindsay Lohan on ask.com looking up. What was it exactly? It was like unexplained bleeding wounds on Ask.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Just like that could be a lovely meme. I don't know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then she got some like YouTube video of just some fucking weird guy smoking a cigarette being like, the mysteries of the mind, you know?
Yes.
Just like your racist uncle shows up to post this fucking weird like mystery of the mind TV show on YouTube.
And it is like, again, like an amazing thing and that you can pinpoint here. It's very easy to come down on her with either of these movies, like when they're at their weirdest and strangest and most, but like quite often it's just like you can see her doing well when she's given like good stuff. And you've seen it in other movies, right? Like,
absolutely,
she does amazing work in Mean Girls, and here, like, she's trying to make a scene where she has a robotic hand work, you know, and that is not like that's not as easy as just like a regular back and forth at a coffee shop scene, you know. Or she's trying to make, and later in the Canyons, make some very ludicrous dialogue work, you know.
Well, that's not her fault. So
exactly.
No.
That's fucking Brett's fault. So
we know who to blame for that.
Should we get into?
So for anyone who's listening and doesn't know, I'll just do a brief summary here, where I'll probably get all the two people's names mixed up a lot, but this is basically we kind of have trappings of a serial killer movie. It's kind of a psychological erotic thriller.
It's a tall tale.
Yeah, and basically Lindsay Lohan is a high school student who gets kidnapped by a serial killer, just very broad strokes here, and returns to her family claiming that she's not her, that she is actually somebody else who just looks like her, but nobody believes her, and she kind of starts to unravel things that we've already kind of spoiled it, and we spoil everything on this podcast, but it kind of comes up that she is the twin sister, the secret twin sister of this girl. So we do have her playing two different roles, although we don't get a lot of the initial Lindsay Lohan. She has glasses, so we know that she's kind of a teacher's pet.
It's alluded to that she's like a virgin or something.
There's a great scene where she's dissecting a worm with in her class, and that's the moment that her kind of boyfriend decides to try groping her, because that's a very romantic time. Kids are always making out on dissection day, when in your high school biology class.
It was a beautiful time.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
And she writes short stories about how she feels like she's half a person or imagining herself as somebody else, and
which is not a throwaway aspect of the plot at all.
Yeah, if you think this might be significant, it is.
It is. Yeah, there's nothing subtle about any clue in this movie. So, and that's fine,
And just to give some context, and just for some context here, this was just a year after she did Robert Altman's final film, A Prairie Home Companion. She was in another movie that year called Bobby, which I haven't seen. I don't think it's very highly regarded, but it's like an ensemble drama about Robert Kennedy that has like Martin Sheen and Anthony Hopkins and William H. Macy in it. And so she was picking these independent films and working with some legendary directors. And it was the next year that she did I Know Who Killed Me, along with Chapter 27, which honestly is another movie we could have picked to talk about with this, the Jared Leto, Mark David Chapman movie, where he gained a ton of weight for it, and then everyone hated the movie. And but this was around the time that also she had a lot of bad publicity as she did this movie Georgia Rule with Jane Fonda that was just a big mess with as far as the tabloids reporting on it, and the studio head, some letter was leaked from him talking about how unprofessional she was and always showing up late or not at all to set because of her drug problems. And I think there was a real sense of everyone piling on her over I Know Who Killed Me, especially that the movie bombed, it was panned, but people were going as far as saying this is one of the worst movies ever made. It won all these Razzies. It actually she tied for worst actress with herself for Chapter 27.
The Razzies are so stupid.
I hate the Razzies. I'm totally
fucking hate them.
But it is it's interesting because she's clearly looking for that next step, like because she has like quite a career up to that point where it is like she is a child star, which is like the classic thing with like had the Parent Trap. She's a borderline freak with how good she is as like a child star in that, like doing those double roles or everything. And then there's like crossover to like sort of more like early teens with Freaky Friday. Does a good job with that, and like which again is like no small feat. Going further into the teen market with Mean Girls, which is like really good. I think she does a great job in Mean Girls.
Yeah, she's awesome.
And she's obviously like now, okay, can I keep going? Can I keep pushing? Like, and breaking the mold of like, you don't, if I can not stay a child star here. And it looked like she was like trying real hard, like making some bold choices.
Yeah, and then she got hit with like fucking Hollywood mid 2000s. You know what I mean? So, which is like, as a lot of people are going off the rails, Britney's going off the rails, and everybody's
Paris Hilton.
Yeah, like there's that era of just like of people just fucking driving fast cars with no brakes, and it's a very common Hollywood pop culture thing. I actually feel like it feels like it happens less now. And if it does,
I think the pile-on maybe is a little less. There's not always. It's not as cool for all the late night hosts to make fun of them every night because people take it a little more seriously.
And we've come a long way with mental health and addiction and just fucking emotional trauma and how people talk about
shaming
it
women
and understand
all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So it's a totally different ballgame. But more importantly, the news cycle doesn't hold on to things anymore anyways. So if you're Lindsay Lohan now and you're fucking up, that's yesterday's news by fucking yesterday. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't have any momentum anymore. Whereas now, because of the internet, because there's a million fucking idiots out there who we have to pay attention to, and which is of all ages. It's not even just young people. It's like these fucking Real Housewife people or fucking Vanderpump people or whatever. But I think that set the mold for how I think that era, especially because it feels like the last of a certain kind of Hollywood of people just being fucking just terrible drunks, drug addicts, crazy people, being fucking late to set, just being like assholes, like movie stars are supposed to be. I think that like fortified a new business in Hollywood for people to just have like the world's greatest teams now surrounding them, that they just have like, fucking scandal people more than ever before, So just like, that shit's just not going to happen anymore.
Well, and
or
look like
much.
Ezra Miller right now that they still put out The Flash.
Yeah.
And apparently that movie didn't do very well, but if it had done very well, I'm thinking and so maybe there will be some sort of repercussions on their career after that. But if it had done really well, I would imagine that people would stop talking about it.
Yeah,
you know what happened, and they would just move on.
Expunged. Yeah.
Totally.
But what I didn't realize was that this movie, which I just watched for the first time for this episode, it now does have kind of a cult following. That it's kind of this midnight movie that has all these screenings. Actually, Charles Bramesco, who we just had on this show, wrote an appreciation for this movie that I came across when I was reading about this. And people, they'll throw out terms like giallo, noir. David Lynch, Brian De Palma, and I can see all that in here. Whether you think that it works or not is another question, but I can see the appeal. Yeah, and it sounds like that's where are you part of the cult then?
Oh, absolutely.
For this film?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I saw it in 2007 first run and I loved it immediately. I mean, like I remember being in the theater being like, this is something else entirely. And now part of it was I love misses. I love swing and a miss. Swing and a hit, it's nice, but I like a swing and a miss. But I don't necessarily think that the film is bad at all. It's just odd. And it's immediately odd. And it's not even like in that odd way where like, whatever. You watch something like that fucking David Lynch makes, whether you like it or not. I appreciate the man, but you could fucking miss me on most of his filmography. So, and like, I get it. And I get but what I always pick up from Lynch that I appreciate about him is that it's an honest weirdness. And most people just want to be weird because they like that honest weirdness, but they're not weird. They do things that are affected and they think are weird. So when you get things that are called Lynchian in quotes, it's just people doing a really bad impersonation of something that barely fucking works from the man himself, in my opinion. So but I see that in that, and I see De Palma, of course, and the giallo is a pretty interesting thing to me because it is it's so far fetched, and I think that that's why. It is like every good Dario Argento movie always has some sort of element where you're like, oh yeah, that's the science here, like Four Flies on Gray Velvet, where the eyeball takes a picture of the last image they saw, and that's how they solve the murder. You're like, go fuck yourself with that science, dude. Like, it's awesome because the movies
Yeah.
are fucking awesome and they can make you believe it will work. Listen, they can,
And
make
that's
you
more
believe
important.
Superman can fly. Yeah. So so the whole twin stigmata thing in this I love because it does remind me of like some of the more far-fetched like plot mechanics of giallos, and it's not science fiction and it's not even body horror. It's just some weird idea that they're like, let's throw that in there. That'll make this work. But when I saw it in 2007 to probably a theater with like me and like two old people at like 2 p.m. who just fucking fell into it as like a fucking discount matinee. I remember being like, I instantly I was instantly enthusiastic about it, but I knew that no one would believe me. You know?
Yeah.
You're like Lindsay trying to convince people that she's not the original girl.
Exactly.
And
I'm
no
like,
one
guys,
will
this
listen.
is really good. But like most people, like it is not traditionally good, but there is something interesting about it. And it plays fast and loose with its own logic, and that works because it's consistent enough.
It's consistently inconsistent.
Yeah, and so that's what works about it. And she's really good in it. And it's got some padding here and there where you're like, you could have did this at a solid 89 minutes and not an hour 44. But like,
although like CSI, like investigative, like police drama in the background is like
you're like why
tacked on. Is like, why are we getting to know these minor characters and they're getting like their little lines and monologues in and stuff, which is just, if anything, they're like funny kind of.
But also like it what helps it does is then on the flip, like I said, it could be an 89 minute, like tight 89 minutes, but that hour 44 minutes with some of that tacked on padded shit just sets you adrift more, and it makes you more involved, even though nothing is going to fucking matter that they're saying. It's kind of like taking like a perfectly round ball and kicking a dent in it and then fucking rolling it again, and it just keeps on doing it. And you're like, what's happening? And none of this shit is red herrings. Like the central mystery here is just like, what the fuck's going on? But I am always genuinely surprised when the dad is like, the couple times I've watched it, and then, I rewatched it today, and I'd watched it last week as well when I thought we were going to do this or whatever. And then I rewatched it today, and I was like, I'm always genuinely surprised that like it's all true, and that the dad bought fucking Aubrey, the twin from the junkie mother, and you're like, oh,
right,
this is actually pretty all right. This reveal,
Yeah, you keep waiting for it to be like she wakes up and it was a dream, or like it is more of a David Lynch thing where none of it makes any sense or in any sort of traditional way, or none of it actually happened in like a traditional way. It was like some of that was real, some of it was not real. But like it is like by the end, all of the ludicrous shit that you're just like kind of trained as a viewer of like David Lynch or like movies in general to be like, okay, something's got to give here. There's some sort of like twist to no, it's all real. It all happened. It's like, it's just,
and they could have
nuts. She got a
they could have pussied out,
she got a robotic hand.
They could have pussied out and it just made it so that she was like just living her story that she's writing about Dakota. You know what I mean? Because they give you that clue that she's been writing a story about her other half that she doesn't really understand why she's writing and how she knows her fucking name. But like,
that was the question I had too, was how does she seem to know what's going on as well as using the twin's name as her password, but she's not supposed to know?
But that's the flip then. So she's feeling something, right? So it all lands actually because they actually land it. They could have just made it so that she's like gets another knock on the head and she's like, oh shit, I'm Aubrey. And then they figure out who the serial killer is, whatever. But the fact that they like go fucking just like whole hog on this ridiculous idea that it, to me, like they're dead serious about it. And so that's why it really works. Like this filmmaker, Chris Siverton or whatever his name is, or Silverton. He's got some weird name that I think it's Silverton, but it's not.
Right, yeah. Like Siverston or something.
Yeah, something like that, right? So he's, you know, he just makes like cheap thrillers. You know, that's like this whole bit. And his whole filmography, which isn't very long, is filled with it. Recently, he actually made a movie with Christina Ricci called Monstrous that wasn't actually too bad. I saw that. So he's still working. That's great. And, you know, hopefully he knows that people love at least one of his movies, which is this one. But recently, like, oh, no, go ahead.
I've heard people kind of credit this as like camp, which I don't really agree with, because I think what you're saying here is that this is a sincere, straightforward thing, and to me, camp has an intention of their winking, and this is just kind of over the top. It's not trying to be campy in the same way that I think people might say that Argento or De Palma movies have a camp element, when I think really what they're just seeing is an overheated nature to it. I think Argento's a really great comparison that you brought up, because he is someone who's just has all of this style and seems like he maybe spends a couple days thinking about the script, and so you get a lot of really dumb stuff in there. And even De Palma, I think a lot of his movies, which are really fun, have some kind of nonsense going on the writing level, and I kind of see that happening here, where it goes into overdrive. He wants to throw in all of this style and themes and everything, and he's being sincere about it, but there is some kind of a disjunction maybe between the kind of sophisticated thriller it's trying to be and the holes all kind of through the script.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, I think that's why it winds up being interesting, because it is like so bloated with ideas. It's like a script that somebody on it's like Southland Tales like level of like in like a little bite-sized snack for me, because it reminds me like Southland Tales. It's like one of those movies where you're like sitting on a bus and you're like, what are you writing? And then somebody's like, oh, well, let me tell you what I'm writing. And it's like, blah, 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 blah. And then they're twins on top.
You're saying this was written on a bus? That's a bold claim, Seth.
Well, but I do agree. Like people are wrong to call this like, and Dario and David Lynch kind of stuff to be like wink, wink, campy, knowing, or even like postmodern, I think is like a wrong way of looking at all of those, is like doing them a disservice, which like what I like about this and what I like about like, it's great to compare this to Dario Argento, even in a production standpoint, where like you can almost see some Dario stuff as being kind of like kitschy or campy, like just like there's a blue light and there's an owl, which you could totally like, you see that in this. There's like a crazy blue light and there's an owl, and it just looks like a silly haunted house shot. And you might be like, oh, he's like subverting by doing the old thing. And like, no, he just loves that. And he's doing it very sincere and honest. And that's what I like about it. He's just going full into the dream. And he doesn't care if there's holes, and he's not worried about that. It's more of a feeling. He's more about the feeling.
Absolutely. And I think that people are seeing this as camp also is because they're mixing the myth with the movie. They're mixing the Lohan myth, what's happening to her at this point in time, and people, you know, the little girl lost bullshit that people just love to fucking magnify and then hold on to, you know. And like what I'm seeing, and I'll probably get shot in the head for this. Like I'm seeing like a fucking Joan Crawford performance in this from Lohan. You know, like it's just really it's like hyper melodramatic and heightened and crazy. You know,
that's great, because that's something people don't talk about with those old movies, that they are like, as much as they are seen as like the pinnacle of acting, like no one would do that now. You would get laughed off the screen. But like,
absolutely,
I agree with some of that.
So I love it, and and this is really ultimately also why it was such an influence on the Holy Days, because it's also low key a Nancy Drew mystery. You know what I mean? Like she's trying to figure something out, and she's a fucking teen girl, like trying to figure out literally who killed her and what her deal is. And she knows who she is, and she can't figure out why she lost a leg. And it's like this great mystery to me, you know, that again, they just go whole hog on. and it fucking rules. You know, but they're
Which
just
that's
like,
a good yeah,
you
that's a
know,
good point, because that is like sort of the real center of this. I feel is, yeah, maybe he is making something for himself, but it does feel like there's some sort of, not pandering, but like trying to make like a really great, like, something for teens to like really kind of trip out and like have a
sure.
weird wild time. Like, almost it reminds me of, I feel the same way about this movie as I feel about Donnie Darko. And that on one level, adult me is kind of looking at the script and saying, like, you're kind of like got some dumb dialogue and this doesn't work and this is silly and stuff. But I don't think it's necessarily for that part of me. I think like that movie and I Know Who Killed Me are more for this, like, I don't know, like this wild, like youthful spirit kind of, that I think, like, yeah, like the best kind of teen stuff is, that is like,
Sure.
yeah, it's like, it's my story. I wrote a story about myself and I feel like I'm two people, and it becomes
Yeah.
literal and
Yeah,
it
yeah,
becomes
yeah.
like so convoluted, like a story that I don't know how to stop telling, you know.
And it's ultimately like, in relation to that, it ultimately is, again, not a traditionally quote unquote good movie that all the plot holes are not, that are all the plot holes are filled, but it's like, it also, to use the parlance of young people these days, it's a vibe. You know, like the movie is a
Yes.
vibe. You know, and that's what's so cool about it to me. Now, even obviously, like, you know, X amount of years later, and people are rediscovering it, and not as like a, you know, some people probably, you know, can, like I said, they can read camp into it because they're thinking about Lindsay and they're thinking about everything else and her as a
And
stripper
like,
and
sure, some
whatever.
of the
And
lines are a little, like, they're like funny, like they're like kind of poorly written or poorly
sure,
acted
of course.
sometimes, and you laugh, like that's part of like the fun of it, I think, too.
And here's the thing though, like, about seeing something as bad, I I tend to think, and this is just something I always think about with bad movies and people laughing at bad movies, or fucking Mystery Science Theater 3000 movies or whatever, is that, like, to me, bad movies, technically bad, that are poorly written or weren't thought through all the way, are more truer to life than anything that's really well made, that's trying to show you something like sincere about the human condition. Because life is messy and no one knows the right fucking thing to say, and most people that you know are fucking stupid, maybe including yourself. So I love movies that are off like that, because to me they're a pure magnification of like the human spirit, you know. Yeah, sure, maybe not Plan 9 from Outer Space, you know, but like, to me, just like watching an old Andy Milligan movie or a Jess Franco movie or fucking Doris Wishman, I mean, those just seem more, or this, you know, it's just, how many smart people do you know, and are you one of them, is a question I often ask when I think about why people like stupid shit. Like, why is Maroon 5 popular? And I think to myself, you know what? How many smart people do I know, and do they have good taste? And am I smart? And I often think,
Right.
no, I'm not. So, but it's cool about
Right,
this
and
movie.
and
Just
is stupid like a useful word anyways in in certain contexts like that? Is it
sure,
just like you sort of trying to protect yourself sometimes? Like, oh, I have just like shit music taste. Like, I hear that people say that, and it's just like,
yeah, yeah,
and then they rattle off some things that, like, yeah, like there's are like hugely successful bands. I don't know,
yeah,
like they're a
yeah,
little,
totally.
like you could call them trite in like some class somewhere, but like I don't know if
Yeah,
that word is useful.
no, it's true, but yeah. So
Well, and let's talk
you,
specifically about
sure,
what this movie looks like, because
sure,
it does. The feeling that I got, seeing this for the first time, is it really does feel like a young director who is like trying so hard to throw in absolutely every like visual gimmick possible. There's a lot of the
Oh
negative
yeah.
exposure and filters and lighting, which is where I think a lot of the Argento stuff comes from.
There's like a
And
35 millimeter section kind of thing where it looks like home video and the girls are screaming on the beach. It's like crazy.
oh
there's
yeah, yeah,
one
totally,
scene like this football game that they go to, and it's like he crams everything into this football game, where all of a sudden they start moving in reverse motion, and there's these thundering sound effects as they bash into each other, and everything goes black and white except for the color blue, all for no discernible reason. And I really feel like this guy did a big part of this director kind of just got his mind blown by Mulholland Drive or something, because especially the way the color blue is everywhere. This is the bluest movie I've ever seen. It's like so, it is so heightened. And we do eventually get kind of an explanation, which is, it's actually kind of obvious, but also is silly at the same time, as far as the, obviously one of her is the blue Lindsay and one is the red Lindsay. And
is that an explanation?
I was seeing so much of that.
That's always the thing. It's just
we get the close-ups of flames. We get a lot of dissolves, which is another thing that Lynch likes to use a lot of. Although
he does,
I don't know, a lot of this kind of did make it feel kind of copy and pasted together rhythmically for this movie. And I think that I've read that there's like a 3-hour cut out there, and maybe that's why.
Oh, what?
I'll fucking take it. I'll fucking take a 3-hour cut of this.
Oh my god!
Give me that fucking Netflix cut up into 3 hours, like 1 episode, 2 episode, 3 episode, like they did with fucking Tarantino's Hateful Eight on Netflix or whatever.
Right.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
There must be so much more. There must be so much more detective stuff in there, because we get these detectives who just like disappear partway through the movie.
It's not just one murder, so
exactly.
Well, they pretty much like solve it at a certain point, and then they like figured out kind of the movie, and then they're out of the movie. Basically, they're just like, oh, they have the same DNA, and then there's
a point where where the new Lindsay reconnects with the old Lindsay's frustrated boyfriend and has sex with him, and which I think that's actually one of the more clever things. It's kind of cool to see her like be like, oh, she would never fuck you, let's do this, and she just has sex with him. But then he also
one leg picks up her crutches and like walks past her mom scoffing like, we're gonna go upstairs and fuck. And then they go upstairs and fuck, and the mom is downstairs trying to drown out the fuck sounds by cleaning dishes and stuff.
It's awesome.
And then he disappears from the movie too, and we like never see
he's done.
He goes with the detectives off somewhere and just have their own movie. But the detective stuff is so silly. I love probably my favorite line is when they're talking about the serial killers or the serial killer, and this guy he gives them like frostbite and then like cuts off their fingers, which is actually a pretty gross scene.
Yeah, that's gross.
That's pretty
gnarly. It was gross.
And one detective goes, I think the cutting is about punishment. It's like, man, you've got it, man.
You just really got into the fucking killer's psyche.
This is some David Fincher shit.
It's like, don't forget, this like kind of comes around the time where maybe it's like kind of on the other end of like the torture porn boom too.
Yes.
So some of the stuff is pretty fucking grisly,
That's
as far as like what they show you, So
there's an unwatchable element to some of that stuff. That was pretty gross watching them. Like he like holds this he like kind of holds down this ice against their fingers using like a tool of some kind, like a vice grip.
Vice grip. Yeah.
Until their fingers turn black, and then he like
peels
starts
it off.
hammering
He's
them
peeling
off.
Fucking skin off and shit.
Yes.
It's fucking awesome. Yeah.
It's like that is a twisted idea that came out of that man's head.
Yeah, that was actually pretty good. Yeah. And but I do love that, she wakes up without a leg and without a hand. And I think that is one of the craziest things about this movie is she gets this like this Buster Bluth style like robot hand with super strength.
Yeah. It is Buster.
Yeah.
Well, there's not a lot of budget in there to like CG out her fucking stump. You know what I mean? Like, so they had to figure out something.
And so she clearly just has on this like rubber glove that it's supposed to have a robot hand underneath it.
Awesome. But she keeps forgetting to plug it in, which the doctors keep reminding her, you got to plug in the bionic hand or it's not going to work. And she's just like, I keep forgetting to plug it in.
The funny thing about that is we get this big warning about how if you got to charge the leg or the leg is going to go out. And he actually doesn't say it about the hand. And I was thinking, this hand seems a lot more advanced than the leg.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hand
Shouldn't we
doesn't-
be
oh,
more
okay,
worried?
So the hand doesn't have to charge. Oh, okay, it's the leg that has to charge.
We don't get a
Hand-
warning about it.
Hand
and,
runs on
Yeah.
enough sun power. I
and
think.
yet with all that setup, it never ends up paying off. Like I think at one
No.
point the battery starts beeping on her leg, but you think it's going to be this big thing, but then it just kind of moves on.
Oh right,
And-
that could be like a cool thing where she's like, "Oh shit, the battery's out," and the guy's chasing her, and she's got one leg.
Yeah.
you
But I
know.
guess maybe that's in the 3-hour cut because we didn't get
It might
that.
be in the 3-hour cut. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Uh,
But she fucks that killer up at the end, you know? So
she does.
exactly. I was
And we
waiting. I was waiting for
That-
that. We did get Chekhov's super robot hand paid off
yeah.
in the
And
end.
the owl on the wall in the first scene goes off in the third, you know? Because that's how
Yeah.
she finds herself, you know?
There you go, film school. You know.
Exactly. And yeah, I know it is fun to ask questions like that because especially when we get into the story with the twin, or she doesn't realize she's a twin. She's just like, "Hey, I'm not this girl. Let me out of here." And she's kind of strangely belligerent with all the investigators, like, "Why are you keeping me in this hospital?" Meanwhile, she's trying to get a prosthetic leg and robot arm, fit in, and but we get these flashbacks where she, her origin story is that she's this stripper and has this awful life and lives in like a slum. And
Stripping
she
to
starts
the Melvins.
Yes.
It's cool.
And I don't know, what do you guys think of the way that stripping is portrayed in this movie? Because it kind of has this kind of, teenage boys like idea of what a seedy strip club is like. But at the same time, it's like anytime a famous actress plays a stripper, it's always kind of like top's always on. She's just in a
Always.
skimpy outfit.
Yeah.
And
it's the most PG-13 strip scene ever.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely
I
like
mean,
somebody who's never been to a strip club but has only seen strip clubs
Yes.
in movies, you know? And that's
Yeah.
also kind of a charming thing to me about it, you know? You're just kind of
it
like,
is.
wow.
Well,
this
and I
is
think David
the
Lynch
most
himself
sexless.
falls under that category a lot too. Like I don't think that
Yeah.
his movies like Fire Walk with Me or whatever are really any less kind of alarmist and simplistic about like, oh my God, look at these beautiful girls doing coke and stripping.
Yeah.
They have
totally.
legs, you know.
He's
But I
just
mean-
terrified of them.
The two twins
definitely.
are these like they're so exaggerated. They're just like very exaggerated, like their flaws and their I don't know. She is like a quintessential like bad girl does drugs is sexy, you know, and then the other girl is like I'm a good girl. I don't do sex. I don't do drugs, and
And she
stuff.
wears
That-
glasses.
That is like the whole thing.
and
is
I
just
write,
like everything
you know.
has to really be
Yes.
like hitting you over the head with it because it's a teenage girl's short story inside of a teenage girl's dream or whatever it is, or something.
It's pretty good, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and this stuff.
And she's never
feel
been to a
like-
strip club. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like we're all pretty much, agreed about what this movie is like. It just depends if that's the kind of thing that you're into, that this is not a boring movie. This is not like,
No.
we'll talk about the canyons too, I guess, but
Sure.
both the movies you could argue are not conventionally of high quality, but this one was much more entertaining for me to actually sit through.
Yeah.
And yeah, and there's just there's a lot there to wade through, especially because the whole thing is that she's this stripper and then all of a sudden she starts getting these wounds from nowhere and her finger like falls off, and
Mhm.
for some reason she feels like she has to lie to everybody about it. And
Yeah, she's not telling anybody about it, which to me is like awesome. She's like, "Oh shit, my finger just fell off. What nasty
sew it
fuck did
back
I
on."
fuck last night
yeah,
that I need to my finger's falling? What sexually transmitted disease makes my middle finger fall off? So
gotta think about it.
is this syphilis? So it's incredible like that she's just kind of like hiding it. You're like,
yeah,
your
and there's
first
some
step
line.
should definitely be going to the hospital, but whatever, all good.
And she does say at one point, "Oh, hospitals are for rich people." And
Yeah,
I
she
was
does
like,
say that.
okay,
Yeah,
I could kind of, it is fucked up in this country. You have to make medical decisions based on financial
Sure.
worries and that kind of stuff. But once
This
your
is
leg
before
falls off,
GoFundMe.
it's like, Exactly.
Yeah.
That's our healthcare right now is GoFundMe. But once your leg falls off, it's like, okay, I'm not going to buy any more that you're not going to the hospital.
Yeah, sorry, kid.
Yeah.
It just
it's
doesn't
bionic.
fall off.
Great.
Yeah.
And
So,
but that's part of the fun. I don't know. That is part of the fun of this movie, though, is considering all of those things, and even how the mystery finally does unfold. She doesn't so much find clues about it as like she just sits down and talks with her mom, and her mom's like, "Yeah, when you were born, it looked like you were going to die, and then they took you away from me, and then 2 days later they brought you back, and you were fine." And and the whole time the dad is creeping behind them to be like, "It was me, it was me," and she doesn't.
Weirdo.
And she's just like the audience. She just thinks, "Oh, duh! Your kid died, and the dad got a twin." And she's just like, "Oh, obviously that's what happened, and that's what we're thinking too."
Received. Okay.
And
thank you. Got it. Yeah.
yeah, and this is our twin stigmata is happening, which I think there actually is a germ of like a decent idea there. Someone is experiencing the wounds of another person that they don't know, and then they get mistaken for them. Like, I think there is an idea in there.
Yeah,
that's kind of
it's called that. I Know Who Killed Me. It's
yeah.
Because I think anybody who tries to do it now, somebody's just going to be like, "Wait, so have you not seen that Lindsay Lohan movie, I Know Who Killed Me?"
Right.
That kind of balls to the wall. This fucking this idea of twin stigmata, But yeah. Basically, my final word on it is it's fucking great. Everybody should watch it and give it a open-minded chance. Because again, like you said, it's not traditionally. It doesn't operate like. How about this? It's not good or bad situation. It doesn't operate as a traditional movie. So it's a little off the cuff. It's odd.
School's
it's
out.
in focus, and they had an editing machine and a lighting package and cameras. So it's a movie. It
is.
But it's a little off, and I appreciate that about it. It's got a couple dents in it, More than a couple, but
Well, just know what you're getting into, and I could see how this became a cult movie. And just to give my final word, we usually at the end of each movie will say whether we would unwatch it or not for any variety of reasons. And I would not unwatch this because, like I said, part of the fun is the disjunction between this kind of Lynch-light psychological thriller that it aspires to be, with this kind of just bedrock kind of dumbness to it in a way that is amusing in that in that sense. And just know what you're getting into, and I think that we've done a pretty good job of giving you an idea of what that is. And I will also
what you're
say
getting into.
that I do think Lindsay Lohan is pretty good in this. I do agree with that she is not the reason to make fun of this movie, or she should not be on the receiving end of this abuse that she got at the time when this movie came out.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah, that so people are in good or bad movies throughout their career, but I think she brings her all to it. And
you try this, okay?
Exactly.
No, she's not sleeping through the movie, and that's the most important thing. She's really actually committing and trying, and it's an energetic performance. It's exciting to watch, actually. So she's cool, man. She's really good in it.
Yeah. So Seth, any final words before we move on?
No, I mean, I feel like I've said what I would say about it. It's like a wonderful meeting place of a lot of what I like, which is the surreal, over the top lynchiness meeting with sort of the surreal stuff that can happen in schlock, I don't know, movies that are just no one kind of cares about them, like Plan 9 or something like that, but then the plot can just go off the rails and go into all sorts of wild places. And again, that is not to compare that to say it's a bad movie. It is just a very interesting movie. And I like anything that can remind you that I don't know, it's a bigger game than just getting a grade or something, right? It's a bigger the bigger game is more of I've had an experience there,
Yes.
it is an experience. And again, it's something that I think maybe it's low hanging fruit to say, but I think it would just be like a good time for teens. I don't think they're really ever gonna probably see this. It probably is going to be more like weird film guys like us watching it because it's kind of obscure at this point. But I don't know. I think it could have like a Donnie Darko kind of like poster on the wall kind of thing for teenagers.
For sure.
Could be a good sleepover movie.
Yeah, it really is. And to me, it
yeah.
plays with a crowd. So it's been playing in New York on 35. This place called the Roxy Cinema screened it, and it screened it to a packed crowd. It plays really well with a crowd when there's actually a crowd in the theater, as opposed to when I saw it, you know?
Right.
And so I would like, you know, it's just a great experience seeing with people, and people are going to laugh at it because that's how the people do at any screening, that any movie that's fucking older than fucking 4 years ago, you know? So, you know, just like, doesn't matter what it is. People will go up to a screening. People will show up and laugh at Casino. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So,
Vertigo. They'll have people will think
it's like, what's
it's
so
corny.
funny about this? Yeah. You know, but
that's an audience problem, not a movie problem.
yeah, no. It's an American audience problem, actually. So, you know, so it's just dumbest fucking country in the world. So, yeah. Anyway,
we
sorry.
are agreed on that.
Yeah, I interrupt Seth's unwatchable watchable. I'm sorry, but
oh no, I'm good. I'm
yeah.
We're there.
No one watches on this one.
Yeah,
not well.
No,
you know,
no.
I will probably watch again.
Yes, I will. We'll probably in the next couple months. So, hopefully.
All right. Well, it was a long 6 years between I Know Who Killed Me and The Canyons. So we're jumping up to 2013 now, and pretty much a kind of attempted career revival at this point, because she did not do much between these two movies. And, you know, further was in more trouble and people mocking her and, you know, going in and out of rehab and that kind of stuff. So it probably sounded like a great idea at the time to be like, all right, we have a Paul Schrader, like independent auteur project written by Bret Easton Ellis. And I believe she's a producer on the movie too. So, you know, they kind of got together with the idea of this being something that could possibly revitalize her career. But there's also, you know, more going on in the movie besides just what's going on with her character.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Paul Schrader is the writer of Taxi Driver. And
Raging Bull, Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah. Like a director also of great movies.
Yep.
And Bret Easton Ellis. You know. Oh yeah. And Bret Easton Ellis is known for writing the book American Psycho and Less Than Zero, Rules of Attraction, like big deal, like Gen X, like dark transgressive writer, counterculture kind of writer guy.
Yeah, so I want to get everyone's thoughts on these two guys before we start getting into Lindsay Lohan too, because I don't have a lot of experience with Bret Easton Ellis. Doesn't really seem like my kind of guy from what I've, the things that I've heard publicly from him and the kinds of things that he tends to write about. So I don't have much of an opinion of him. But Paul Schrader, I mean, you could consider him a legend. That's, you know, he's known a lot for his writing with Martin Scorsese. And when I was looking back at this, I'm not aren't a lot of his own directed movies that I love. I love Blue Collar. That's by far my favorite that I've seen from him. But, you know, he has done stuff like you mentioned, Chris, Hardcore, and First Reformed was a recent one that was really critically acclaimed.
I like American Gigolo and Mishima a lot.
Mishima is a big one.
Yeah, Mishima's great.
But he also sometimes seems to me like the kind of director that he's kind of just as likely to put out kind of a misfire as like a masterpiece from movie to movie. But I don't know where do you land on him? Because a lot of the stuff, like even First Reformed and Mishima, like I kind of am a little more lukewarm on than a lot of other people are. And that might just be my taste.
Yeah, I mean, because really they're like First Reformed and Mishima or whatever are just well regarded, you know.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like above board, there's not a whole lot of lukewarm responses. So it's totally a taste thing, which is fine because like First Reformed is a really cold ass movie. And then so is the movie he made after it, The Card Counter, and then recently Master Gardener. But what's important to understand about Schrader making The Canyons at this time is because he's floundering. You know, he made the Exorcist prequel a couple years before, and sorry, and that's like a total that's a
right.
total failure. Like Dominion, I think it was called, or something. Exorcist Dominion
That was
or something.
him? Wow.
Yeah, well, let me rephrase. He made it. They finished principal photography. They got into editing, and they fired him. And they had Rennie Harlan, you know, Hollywood's favorite fucking hack, come in and reshoot the whole entire movie, basically.
Yeah, there's basically
So-
2 versions of that Exorcist movie
Yes,
that are completely
absolutely.
different.
So the well-regarded Paul Schrader legend, he's at a complete like decline at the Canyons. Obviously his 80s career is well regarded for obvious reasons, and to me his 80s output, Cat People, Mishima, Light Sleeper with fucking Willem Dafoe and Susan Sarandon, I mean, these are all great movies. Hardcore is a great movie. You know, it all works for me pretty much. Canyons, well, the Exorcist prequel is garbage, but yeah, so it's like people didn't start loving Paul Schrader again until First Reformed came out. People were like,
Right.
oh, Paul Schrader, because right before that he made a couple like Nicolas Cage busters, like Dog Eat Dog, that aren't good, or depending on which version you watch, I don't like either. There is a director's cut that exists that's a little bit
I was
better.
curious about that one, but yeah.
It's not great. And you kind of got to be like a Schrader apologist. Like you got to be like a dyed in the wool fan. Boy could do no wrong, no matter what bullshit he puts out, to really appreciate some of those lows, maybe including the Canyons, but you know, whatever. So that's my take on Schrader. I love him. And I love this new old man, clean, cold style where he's like kind of taking, you know, cause he started his career early on when he was like a fucking college student. He wrote this very influential book, or this book about I can't think of it, transcendental cinema, where he goes over Ozu and Dreyer and Bresson and all of these like very austere, clean filmmakers, you know, who could be considered slow cinema by some people, you know. And he wrote this really influential book, and it's very thoughtful and very good, but he never really made a movie like that. And then, you know, you come around to something like First Reformed, and he's like, I'm going to try this out finally. This thing that I've loved, I've loved forever, that I didn't think I had the fucking balls, but now I'm like fucking in my 70s or 80s or however the fuck old he is. And he's like, yo, I'm going to come hard with this shit. First Reformed is a success. I like the card counter with a knucklehead there who's in the Star Wars
Oscar
movies.
Isaac, right?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And even though it's kind of the Tiffany Haddish role is really bizarre, but that's kind of exciting too, because she's kind of miscast. And then the recent one, Master Gardener, with Sigourney Weaver and that Australian guy whose name I can't think of, is about a neo-Nazi in witness protection who becomes a master gardener for a rich woman in the South. And it's pretty good, but it is kind of the kind of movie that you have to be a Schrader head to really like a lot, I think, because I could see how it would turn people off. Anyways, sorry, I talk a lot.
Oh no.
So
That's what this is for.
Yeah,
no, that's a
true.
great way to frame where Paul Schrader was at this time too.
Yeah,
so you
a
could see
low,
this.
a fucking low.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
And you could.
know?
I kind of wonder, you know, how much of this is a Paul Schrader joint and how much of it is a Bret Easton Ellis project, because I hear so much of Ellis in the dialogue and the sensibility and everything. And I also wonder if, apparently I heard something where Ellis was saying that he imagined this script making a more like kind of lively, punchy, like dark comedy kind of movie, which is not how Schrader shoots it. It's very like static and sleepily kind of paced in that kind of Bresson way, that's, you know, his thing. So maybe we just had a mismatch here between sensibilities also.
Which it is interesting to see. It does feel, as someone who has read a few of Ellis's books and is kind of like begrudgingly, like at least like over the years, begrudgingly like followed him a bit, of just like it does feel like his world of he just has this patented sort of like, we're watching the most awful, like top of the food chain rich people be just so uncaring about the world beneath them, quote unquote, and everything like that. And
Aren't
just,
these young
aren't
people
they saying
awful?
just bad things? At his best, though, I do enjoy the book Less Than Zero. I never got through American Psycho, but I think at his best, like something like Less Than Zero, and at the better parts of American Psycho and in his other books, is that he weaponizes that in a way, like weaponizing boredom or weaponizing like really pushing your face into like a space that you don't want to be in and you feel uncomfortable in, but you also feel kind of like you've infiltrated someplace, you're a fly on the wall. And like, yeah, like the way that, you know, even in the movie like American Psycho, everybody knows that like there's just minutes where they go by where he's just saying the most dull bullshit about what he does with his shampoo, you know, and stuff like that. And it's all there in his novels, which is like this sort of like just bombarding you with malaise. Ellis himself, it's interesting. It seems like they've both kind of came to this sort of angry old man phase, which I've became like a big, like, I hate it. It's like this thing that I hate listen to, which is the Bret Easton Ellis podcast for me personally, because I both like find him interesting as an artist and interesting as a persona, just even on the level of listening to him be like a bitchy kind of queen about shit, like on his podcast, just bitching and bitching about stuff about the movie industry. And but like his like
that,
almost
yeah.
every single episode of his podcast comes to this point where he has to ask whoever it is about the like the point we're in where like what happened to movies, what's wrong with movies, do we go to movies anymore, what happened now, is it Generation Snowflake ruining everything? It's just like
The
always
woke
he's
mob.
like just obsessed with it, which like for me it's like basically no, it's like the classic thing, Brett, where it's like you're older now and you're kind of out of the loop maybe and you're probably panicking about it, but I say all this to segue into like the opening of the movie and sort of a motif of the movie is these like deserted theaters, and there's even talk here and there about like how nobody goes to movies anymore. And uh I don't know, yeah, like Mark and I were kind of like watching the movie and scratching our heads about that as to like what the movie actually had to say about that, in a movie that is basically like a drama. Like most of it is just back and forths with like characters like, you know, sort of having like cheating and, you know, like infidelity and things like that.
Yeah, the
I do.
whole industry setting kind of felt incidental to me, that these people could have been in any business, and all those shots of the movie theaters, I mean, to me almost felt like kind of a last ditch attempt of layering some more thematic meaning that wasn't explored totally in the movie. But I don't know, maybe you disagree, Chris.
But I'm curious about it. I don't know.
Well, here's what I got to say. For one thing, is that there's a great quote by Paul Schrader about Bret Easton Ellis's writing, is that he calls it beautiful people doing bad things in nice rooms. And that couldn't be a more succinct description of Ellis's writing. And that translates
and this
obviously to this movie. Is so to me, like, I love Ellis. I love what people probably would tag as problematic Ellis now on his podcast and all the shit he talks. And the contrarianness of him, I appreciate, but I love his writing because of all that minutia, because of all that boredom. I don't really give a fuck about the bad things. I love like, okay, I'm going to talk about this fucking Cabossier's fucking like chair for like fucking 2 pages for no reason, you know, because it's a rich thing, you know, it's a wealthy thing. And so
no, it's effective.
And so how Schrader shoots this movie to me is actually like, Ellis can be he's a huge film head. He loves movies. He obviously, because he fucking talks about the fucking industry all the time, and he always is trying to get things made. To me, it's not something like Rules of Attraction is the best Ellis, or even Less Than Zero is the best Ellis. or the most appropriate representation of how he writes in his style, it's this movie, which is dry, overlit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just like bored people. Lesson Zero's I love Lesson Zero, the movie, but it's actually too exciting in comparison to how the book is. Same thing with Rules of Attraction, and same thing with American
Interesting.
Psycho. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Like
felt
they
like
are
Rules of Extraction was the closest for me, but that's true that this one is like, yeah, it is right there. It is
it,
Ellis like audiobook.
yeah, and it's just like there's like Ellis's books rule to me, but they don't have like dramatic presence. So when a movie's purpose is to show you its dramatic presence, or to some people in some situations, because a movie can be anything, as we obviously talked about before the fucking first movie. So I just like, to
Mhm.
me, how I read Ellis and how I consume Ellis and how I see Ellis is actually the Canyons, which is shot on digital, with the world's like with every single light turned on, and you know what I mean, and like bright and vapid people barely acting and being very bad at acting. Um, and I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've met people like this, you know what I mean, in
Mhm.
life, who just are bored rich people who have zero personality, and their personality is actually just power. In the case of Christian in this movie, you know, where it's just like, you know, and I don't know. I watch it and again, this is actually like could be considered a bad movie. um, but
It could.
because like I don't know, are you guys familiar with the director David Decoteau?
No.
Okay, so he's been around forever.
Mhm.
He is an 80s guy, he's a 90s guy, but around this time that um that The Canyons is being made, he made a series of movies like called 1313. And then they would always have some sort of subtitle after it. It'd be like 1313, Cowboys from Hell. And it would be a Western. None of them are connected other than the fact that they have 1313 at the beginning.
Mhm.
And they're written and directed by David Decoteau. And what I love about this movie, when I first saw The Canyons in 2013, is what I was like, damn, this is like the best David Decoteau movie I've ever seen. Because all of his movies around this time look like this. They look like hot dudes with their shirts off, and maybe one girl with her shirt off. Decoteau is gay, and so he just uses it most of the time as an excuse to just make shirtless dudes take showers and like fight each other and like, you know, do some other weird shit. But but they're all rated PG-13. They're fucking amazing. But you know, his career goes back into the 80s and 90s. He worked for fucking, you know, he made Nightmare Sisters with like Linnea Quigley, and you know, he's been around forever. He made some of the fucking Puppet Master movies. You know, he's been
Ooh.
around for a really long time, but his output in the mid 2000s to the 2010s is these just churned out these like. So anyways, all to say that that's what this movie really reminds me of, is a David Decoteau movie. And it's got zero, what I love about it, it's got zero personality, you know, like it's
Really
like
does.
got the worst, it's a flatline heartbeat, and no amount of shoehorned in murder or random sex scene with Lily LeBeau and some random dude and James Dean and Lindsay Lohan can make it exciting. And that's cool to me, because you're just so worn out by the time anything exciting truly happens that it flatlines you. And it's like mostly like the movie's just an ambient track, you know.
Mhm.
You're just listening to like an ambient song, but you're watching
Wait,
it.
oh, that's
You know?
good, because that is how Ellis makes me feel, even in
Yep.
his prose. Is
Sure,
that it's
absolutely.
more, it's like drone. It's drone. It's the
Yep, it's
drone of the
drone.
monotony and everything.
Exactly.
And these people are like voids, right? They
Mhm.
are like what you're saying, like you're sort of starting to feel like the way they feel, which is like, yeah, like what you're saying. When you get to the sex scene with Lindsay Lohan, and it should be exciting and like everything, it's like you're also don't give a shit. They're like
Nope.
everybody else, where they're all like
Yeah.
so bored, so fucking
Yeah.
over everything.
Yeah, we were kind of laughing watching this, just picturing Paul Schrader like sitting in his directing chair with like a cup of coffee and Velcro shoes, and just like watching the directing like these almost porn scenes.
Yeah.
It's
And
just
Ellis
like
being
maybe
like,
the
"Can
least.
we get one more guy in here? Can we get one more naked guy in here?"
Yeah, can we get one more naked guy in here for sure?
Which
Yeah.
I loved that. That is like maybe one of my favorite parts. That I just like Ellis definitely not abusing his power, but having fun and like letting him like, I would like to see James Dean, naked maybe. So
Well,
Well, yeah, and we should.
before. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, just for anyone, for the probably 99% of people listening to this who haven't seen this movie,
it's true. We got really carried
there's
away.
not
but
much. There's
Yeah,
not
we
really.
went like 30 minutes in before we're gonna do
the
the
movie is
description.
a
so-
wormhole void. I'm telling you, it's a wormhole void.
Well, I was kind of dreading doing a plot summary too, because so much of it is not a lot happens. It's like there's a situation, I guess. So we have Lindsay Lohan living with a kind of movie producer trust fund baby who's played by James Dean, Deen, the actual real life porn star, and they they're in a relationship. They're both cheating on each other and have had past relationships with other people that the other isn't aware of, and they just kind
They
of go
hook
in
up through
circles
cell phones
around
with,
that.
like and have threesomes with random people and or even couples and things, and it's very
Sure.
like very exotic in the film, which by today's standards I guess looks a little funny, like to like probably a Gen Z person looking at it, them basically using Tinder on their phones and and like people looking aghast as like, wow, you guys like are polyamorous, although they never would use that term in this movie.
Yeah, and I guess like there is a particular guy who he casts in a movie that it turns out is in love with his girlfriend, and he kind of becomes obsessed with tormenting this guy. And that's pretty much a lot of it. When it comes down to the action, it's a lot of, good looking people like walking into rooms and talking about who they're fucking, who someone else is fucking, how they're not happy about this or that. And they just kind of then walk into the next room and talk to a different person about it. And
A lot of
like you said, they
backstabbing.
they do throw in a murder like at the very end as a kind of like, hey, look, like here's, something had happened. But like you were saying, Chris, just like the sex scenes, it all kind of just stays on that one EKG level solid, through the whole thing all the way to the end, which could super aggravate you, or you could argue that it does evoke this completely vacant, vapid mindset of these people. And it makes me wonder, it sounds like that's common in a lot of Ellis's work. And it sounds to me like maybe American Psycho is kind of the one exception that more people know about, because it has that, but it's in this stark contrast with the whole serial killer thing, which adds a dramatic engine to it and makes it a lot funnier to see it juxtaposed that way. Whereas here, it's like American Psycho if he was just a boring Wall Street guy,
right?
and
It's
didn't
funny
kill
to
anybody.
consider it that like actually what you find out is that the murder is levity in Ellis. Actually, like it's actually more of like, oh, that is like a relief from the monotony and nihilism, right?
Yeah. And so, but the difference obviously is that also American Psycho has like a fucking double-barreled performance by Christian Bale, which is also makes it more legendary than anything else, because he's so good.
Yeah, whereas here we have. Are you still there, Chris? You kind of froze on my end. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm if you can hear me.
All right. Okay. Sure. We're cool. So, yeah, and here we have a literal porn star who, this James Dean guy, I can see why they cast him in this. And when the movie started, I was thinking, all right, this guy is, he's a convincing, vapid, like nonchalant asshole for sure. As it went on, you could also start to see that as kind of a one-note performance, that he found a guy who can only deliver lines like this, who can only stare off distractedly into the distance, and was like, all right, this will work for this role. But I'm not sure that made it like a good performance here, because he did start to grate on me a little bit as it goes. Absolutely. And the other people, I don't know, what was kind of funny about this movie, me reading about it, was that it was supposed to be like this is the new way that we're going to do movies, that they did a lot of social media promotion 10 years ago when that wasn't as integral to movie promotion as it is today. And
they
they
used to
actually
like GoFundMe.
yeah,
you know,
exactly. That's
or-
right. Or
Yeah.
Kickstarter
Yeah.
or whatever the thing was
Kickstarter,
then.
Kickstarter, yeah, for sure.
And they even used this website to cast everyone outside of the two main roles. That was like where people could just get access to a few script pages and anyone could submit their audition. And they were
Yeah,
like,
they do
this
a
is the
self-tape
way of
for
the
it.
future.
Yeah.
And I mean, the result here is a lot of outside of these two lead roles, kind of like teen soap opera performances. I don't know, the other main guy is from Glee or something who didn't really
And
do
then there's
much
this
for
other
me
guy
either.
from porn. I don't know his name, but I was like, oh, I've seen that guy.
Yeah, you're talking about Danny Wilde in the opening scene.
Yes. Who
Yeah,
is an
so
author,
Danny-
I think, too?
He
Isn't
is.
he
Yeah,
an
that's what I was
author?
saying earlier. So I've known Danny for a long time, and James, because I used to work at kink.com, and James was there every day.
Oh.
Basically from 2009 to 2012, I worked for kink.com as their set decorator. James was a big proponent of the shoot team there. He was there all the time, and so was Danny Wilde, who's the first guy that they call over, you know, who just is got the haircut and the plugs, and you know, takes off his shirt and he takes off his pants and he starts jerking off.
He's the
or
one who
whatever.
jerks off
So-
in the yeah.
Yeah. It actually has one of the most compelling, and I was actually talking to Chris because I was texting him being like, I'm watching the Canyons, dude, and I'm about to talk about it on a podcast tomorrow. So he was like, it's got one of the best shots of the movie because it's an inadvertent kind of happenstance shot, which is James Dean's or Christian's cell phone shot of Danny jerking off and Christian going down on Lindsay Lohan or whatever. And it's just like this bad angle of just of Danny jerking off. And it's just like, it only comes in for a second. I was like, but this is like the most compelling shot of the whole movie. This is actually a very good shot because it's so weird. And you don't see anything like it again. But so Danny, his porn name was Danny Wilde, but he retired from the business and he is now known by his regular everyday guy name, which is Chris Zyshik. And he's written some amazing books. Body to Job, which is actually about his time in the porn industry, is very good. And he wrote a book for amphetamine sulfate called The Magician, which actually is currently sold out and won't be in, it's out of print right now. It will be back in print next year sometime. I did the cover for that. He's awesome.
Oh, hell yeah.
And
yeah, I
actually
forgot
just
I
read-
had listened to a podcast with him, like, on like called Wake Island, and I thought he was just
absolutely.
so like fascinating on there, and I was meant to look up his book, so that's awesome that you know.
Yeah. So he fucking rules, man, and he's definitely somebody. Like when I was at Kink, we didn't really know each other very well, and then it just kind of we kind of met each other after he was like retired, because he was in a band with another porn star named Chad Fierstad. And he's and so they were in a band together, and I did some art for them, and then you know we were kind of like releasing books at the same time, and he's in the Hunchback 88 reissue, and actually he has I'm probably blowing up his spot with this, but I'm just going to say it anyways. He's got a book of short stories coming out, and one of the stories is actually about him killing me.
Whoa!
All right.
Yeah, it's fucking rules. I don't
You
know
know
when
who killed
that's coming
you.
out. I definitely know who killed me. It's it's Danny. It's Chris. So yeah, we're friends, and he's again in that scene, and then later, and that foursome that happens is Lily LeBeau is the girl, and she worked for Kink a lot too, and so it was just for me it was almost like, oh, it's cool, all these people that I know are in this movie, you know, like at the time when it came out, and then rewatching it the two times I watched it for this podcast, because I watched it twice for the podcast. So
I like the
why not?
idea of that that seeing, you know, someone like Paul Schrader, who's kind of in this upper, you know, echelons of the people that he's worked with in his career.
Sure.
And you can totally see in this movie from the way that they cast it, and, you know, the fact that there's an actual like porn star in basically the lead role of the movie, and that you can see him kind of moving among this circle that you normally wouldn't have. And I think that's one of the interesting things about this movie. It is seeing that kind of disparity, and that all of these people who worked on this movie can say that, they were directed by a guy who directed, George C. Scott and Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
And that makes this a
absolutely.
kind of a fascinating object in that way.
It is, yeah. And it is ground zero for a certain kind of film funding, like they said, because really it is the future of film funding. And they were kind of ahead of the curve on it by predicting that, because people do Kickstarter, it worked out. Spike Lee did it that next year. Zach Braff did it for his terrible movie that he made after Garden State or whatever,
Right.
where they like crowdfunded their movies. So this was kind of like a ground zero for people in Hollywood to test that out. I mean, Spike did it. And what did he make? The Blood of Jesus, maybe, or something like that. One of those movies that he made.
Oh, right, right.
Was like a completely crowdfunded movie. And the hiring of James Dean is actually obviously all Bret Easton Ellis. Ellis was a huge fan of Dean's work, and he always was tweeting at him and talking about him on Twitter. And then when it came time to make this movie, I guess how it worked out was that it was just like, that's how it had to be. It's like, if you want me to write this, if you want to make my script, we got to hire James Dean, as the lead, because that's who I see as Christian, And Schrader was like, I guess, in that weird Schrader voice where he's like, can he act? Because I don't know if you've ever heard Schrader talk, but he's got some weird ass, he's got a really bizarre like cadence and a kind of a little bit of a strange lisp. And, so yeah.
Which James Dean was sort of this like big porn star as far as like, it was, I don't know, at least as an outsider, it seems like he was big for his like roughness,
yes,
fronting
absolutely.
that sort of like rough sex thing, like Pornhub, like the
and
roughest
we should
thing, like sort of highlighting that being like the in the like title of the video or whatever. And
sure.
he eventually was like, I know, canceled. Like,
yes, he was.
Yeah, there were a lot of sexual impropriety accusations in the filming of his scenes, and then also I think a girlfriend or somebody accused him of rape. There was a whole bunch of stuff that now I'm pretty sure most places have kind of cut off any connections that they had.
Yeah,
it's just another like thread of just, it's very like there's a lot, like there's a whole ecosystem around this movie that is very fascinating, and just like in one way or another, it just like doesn't stop. The movie itself is like a whole other thing. Like, yeah.
Well, yeah, and it is interesting. I could see people thinking that this movie does play like the dialogue scenes in an actual porn movie. Yeah. Besides there are some pretty, a lot of actors who are not as comfortable in front of the camera as Lindsay Lohan is. That's why another thing, I think that whatever you think of this movie, you can't put any of the blame on her. That she is somebody who gives a compelling performance and clearly just has more experience than a lot of the other people in this movie.
Absolutely, yes.
Including
I mean,
James
everybody
Dean.
else is James was a very good porn performer, and he could in that kind of filmmaking or whatever, he could deliver lines and he could act very well. I think that this probably, I obviously can't speak for him, and I haven't talked to him in probably a decade or so. Just to me, he seems like he's trying really hard, but he also maybe feels a little lost. But that, I feel like, helps his performance. You know what I mean? Maybe that one noteness works for him because he's not a dimensionally interesting character in general, because he would not be an interesting person in real life. So that kind of faulty one noteness and that arching eyebrows and the puckering of his lips when he's like trying to act like without saying any words, use your face, buddy. It just, I don't know. It works for me. The other guy, the fucking Ryan Funk or whatever that actor's name is, who plays the other guy, he just flat out sucks. Like, just sucks.
Yeah, he's like
he
some
sucks.
Kind of
poor guy.
Justin Bieber kind of analog.
He's garbage. But like that, also that like that blank, stupid frat boy like aggression to him and him getting mad about things and being a jealous little dick. Like, also kind of probably how a guy like that acts. Yeah. Like, whose personality is who he's fucking, you know what I mean? Like, and how cool his body looks, and whatever. So you know.
Well,
But
one thing Seth said
he's-
when we were watching this was that this is one of those movies that would probably be a lot more interesting to watch like a documentary of its making or to just hang around on
Sure.
the set, because I think a lot of
Yep.
what you're saying is it almost does function in that documentary way of these are people who are embodying the kind of person Ellis is writing about because they kind of are those people, not because
Yes.
they're you know
Yeah.
masterfully tapping into them.
Yeah.
And that does give this an aura and an atmosphere, if nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like you said, drone. It's a drone movie. You know,
Yeah.
like it just hums, you know, it's just got a hum to it, you know?
I like what you
And
said
it-
about James Dean's performance and that it highlights something in Ellis that he does. The James Dean character. What is his name? In the
Christian.
movie?
Christian.
Christian.
Yeah.
Christian.
Yeah.
Great name for an evil porn star person to have. But yeah, it's a good example of this sort of like I'm with it in that he is like a perfect example of a guy who is just so like realistically like void and like uninteresting and not multi-layered at all, but almost like watching him, it's like Ellis does have this other element of like fantasy. Like it almost gets like blown to the point where he is like, this person is just such a void, they become like a cartoon or something. And I feel like that can kind of work as either a bug or like a feature for some people in all of his work. And yeah, it depends on a lot of this stuff. And for me, it did wind up being like pretty tough, where it is just like I am now like again like there. It's hard to differentiate between drone music that I like and then drone music that I don't like, because they're both doing like
Right.
in this one, like
Sometimes
Brian
it's just an
Eno
air
is
conditioner someone left
he's just
on.
hitting the fucking
Yeah.
chord and just going for it, and I love it. And then he's doing the exact same thing, and I'm like, I just don't, I don't like that.
Well, it comes down to
it
tone.
is just like
with
a
drone, you know?
it's down to some sort of tone or something. It's hard to pinpoint, but it's like it is like it proves that it is a careful balance. There's more goes into it than we think, like on the outside. And here it is that it is so like the repetitive nature of it and the monotony for me in this one, where in other Ellis joints I feel like wind up being like a good thing and it is like useful. Here it winds up being like what it actually usually is, which is like off-putting, like and in a way that is like makes me want to sort of get away from the movie.
Yeah, and it also makes that point pretty clear in the first scene. Like you get it, and doing it over the same thing then for a whole hour and 45 minutes. It's like we've evoked this pretty quickly, pretty powerfully.
I officially feel icky.
Yeah.
And is there a movie here beyond that? I guess is the question. And if I was going to be more like concrete, I guess, about the criticisms, is there was a feeling of this being kind of out of touch, which, you know, maybe at this point, Easton Ellis and Paul Schrader, you know, didn't necessarily have their finger on the, you know, the pulse of these youthful people, that he does kind of treat, you know, threesomes and partner swapping like it's just the height of depravity. And there's
right, that there's the innocent guy on the other side of the table who would be like, wait, what? You would like it just seems it seems a little trite now, kind of the
and even to the point where there's some,
even if you are like kind of like weirded out, you're like basically like culturally now you're basically not allowed to do that, so you just wouldn't do
of
that.
course.
I feel like you know.
And so maybe they also weren't the people to pioneer this new kind of, you know, crowdfunding movies and casting people over the internet and stuff. Like maybe their heart wasn't totally in it. There is some kind of funny technology stuff in here too, that like there's a scene where she's using some kind of service where she's like text messaging over the TV screen.
Yeah,
which kind
it's
of
really weird.
It was like we were just a little too early. Because, you know, now when people text in movies, it pops up on the screen. Like they figured out how to show you texting in movies, and they hadn't quite figured that out at the time. And
Absolutely.
Christian does have this just kind of vaguely defined tech guy, like every rich guy just has a tech guy who
Yeah, he's got
can,
the guy in the chair. Yeah.
yes,
He
who can
was
hack.
very, he's like
He can
into
hack
his
into deleted
Facebook.
text messages on other people's phones. He can hack into their Facebooks, and he can hack
bank
into their
account.
bank accounts.
How long will it take
Yeah.
you to get into the bank account?
And it
About
really
a half
felt
hour.
that, like, the guy who wrote this, like, definitely needed his kids to set up his iPod, like, in 2013.
or his like twink boyfriend. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. His young chicken. Yeah, for sure. So,
And I do
all
think
good.
that's a little indicative of some, these are kind of purposefully bland caricatures of people that we're seeing, but there is a certain level of tone deafness to it also that
Sure. Yeah,
didn't
definitely.
help. And
Yeah.
you could say whether it's intentional or not, it's kind of a boring movie, but maybe that's at least
Yeah, which is where
how
the
I
drone
saw
comes
it.
in. Yeah.
Right. It's
Yeah,
about
definitely.
boring people. And it just depends.
Yes.
How interested are you in boring idiots? And if you want to delve into them, here's a lot of time you can spend with boring idiots.
Yeah, it's how much you want to
You
get
know.
on their level. And like I think a lot of people, or maybe just a lot of film fans tried to get on that level because of the pedigree,
Mhm.
and that's why people come out of it, wanting more out of it. But and I did initially as well in 2013, but upon seeing it a few times over the past decade, I've been able to get on its level, but I know it now. You know what I mean? I can't imagine what a first viewing looks like now. You know what I mean? But like, I've seen it a few times. So for me, I'm just like, to me, it's just like warm bath movie. Like it's a drone, it's an ambient track. It's just and to me, like also the thing I love about it, and I kind of said this at the top a little, is that it is from intent to execution like a perfect landing because of who's involved, especially at the root of the words of the idea, which is Ellis. Kind of just to get it, to me, it's like the greatest Ellis adaptation or whatever, just because to me it matches his writing. Like so, I I love it. I would never fucking recommend it to anybody in the fucking world.
Yeah.
Ever. I wouldn't be like, yo, you got to see the Canyons, dude. Sick. James Dean, perfect actor. Lindsay Lohan, bringing it. Paul Schrader, top of his game. Ellis, genius. I would never say that. But I really like it. And not because I don't believe in guilty pleasures. You just like what you like. Who fucking cares?
Sure.
So, you know what I mean? Like, so I love it.
And I would agree.
Show it to anybody? No, but still.
Yeah,
I'll talk about it for an hour and a half with you guys on a fucking podcast, apparently. So,
well, that is the real thing about the movie. Is just like, man, it is a conversation. Yeah, it is a conversation to be had.
Yeah, you won't forget it. You might have been bored, but you'll think to yourself, like, you'll now think to yourself, Paul Schrader, and think, oh yeah, the Canyons.
Right.
You'll think blue collar, and then you'll think the Canyons. That rules.
Oh, God help us.
There's the Canyons, the entity, which is like the strange raw material that I will remember. And then there's the Canyons, the actual movie, where like the actual like what happened, it kind of has already kind of disappeared from my mind.
But the idea will always be there. Of the Canyons.
That's right. That's important because you can't say that for a lot of movies, especially these days. So I appreciate that about it,
Well, that's about as good of a defense of this as I could possibly imagine. And even though if I had to sit down and make the decision, I could see unwatching this, maybe not knowing it and experiencing it. So I'll keep the idea and unwatch the experience of sitting there for an hour and 45 minutes. But I do, at least in terms of Bret Easton Ellis, I could see this being distilled down to its purest essence, for better or for worse. That you're right, there is an absolute purity to tapping into exactly the kind of thing he wants to tap into. Whether it's experiential or makes you think about it, or however you want to process it, that the everything about it, the stiltedness, the how awful and boring the people are, like he is the poet laureate of these boring idiots. And and that's you could appreciate it on that level.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also would not recommend it to anybody.
No, man, no.
But so Seth,
Yeah,
where do you land between the two of us?
I mean, it's pretty tough because it is like the final product. Like I said, like the actual movie itself does really disappoint me in a way that, and part of it is maybe that I was like really, I was excited by what is surrounding it, which will I think always be like something that probably like either harms like kind of harms the movie for some viewers. Is that like that's a lot to live up to, like a lot of legacy to live up to. And I do agree from the perspective of being a fan of Ellis's work that this is very close to what an Ellis book like is. It's just like, I guess the example I would use is like, and I have some like reservations about the movie for sure, but I don't hate it as much as a lot of people did. The Watchmen adaptation, where it's like it is in a lot of ways like the antithesis of what the book The Watchmen is, which is not flashy, no slow motion, no like wild like you would never read The Watchmen, and like the whole point is that they're like clothy, like stupid looking guys in a room. And then Zack Snyder does something that is more like in the imaginary realm of what's going on in The Watchmen or something. But not.
I thought it needed
but
sex scene scored to Hallelujah when I read it.
I thought so. But in that way,
the Canyons
like
could have used a scene like that too, by the way.
And I think like a more like true adaptation could have been good for The Watchmen, but it would have been sort of like the way the Canyons work for me, where it's like it is now clothy people in a room looking sad, and now I don't know if I really like it, and it would make a better book. Like I wondered the whole time about like the Canyons as Bret Easton Ellis, like another novel, and I think it like would be better suited as that. Because it is kind of a slog, and some of it does feel a little like they're really working with what they got, but they can only get so much out of it. Some of like the production feels a little schlocky, like student filmy almost sometimes. Lindsay is kind of cool. Like she's like a lighter, like trying to flick, and like she's trying to get the fire going, and it never quite gets going.
I mean, she's the only professional acting in the movie, so
yeah, absolutely.
Wait, except Gus Van Sant, I want to make sure we recognize his cameo as a therapist.
Oh my god!
Yes.
And the fucking
So awesome.
fact that you don't forget you're in an office of a shrink, so there is a portrait of Sigmund Freud above
yes,
the
most importantly,
character who may or may not be struggling with his gay identity or something, which I thought was
and the most
really kind of
insane like key light on him, like he's like an angel. Like he's super, he's lit so bright and crazy. Like it's like how fucking Richardson fucking lights the Tarantino movies, where you're like, where the fuck is this light coming from, dude? This spot.
Honestly,
this, like,
I felt like I would have
crazy spot.
I would have liked more of that in this movie. I feel like,
yeah.
And I feel like I've heard Ellis talk about that he wishes there was more like, I don't know, like more of like that kind of energy in film, of like bold strokes as far as cinematography and like color and things like that. I kind of wish there would have been more of that or something in this. But yeah, all to say, like basically I would never be able to unwatch it because I would never be able to avoid it. But I didn't necessarily like the viewing experience for sure. I was like, but I would never be able to avoid it because of the shit I love, which is kind of like always gravitating around this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and yeah. So, Chris, is there anything else that you want to say on this topic? I would like to bring it around a little bit back, I guess, to Lindsay Lohan, because with everything else going on in this movie, it's kind of, there's not even that much to talk about regarding her, really. But this did not bring back her career or start anybody else's. It was kind of a dead end for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
just like, to me, it's just like just, you know, like a cliche, somebody be like, just another Hollywood story, you know, where it's just like, not, like a flash in the pan and nothing happened out of it, you know? And, but yeah, it definitely didn't revive her career, unfortunately. I wished it kind of would have.
Me too.
Because I would like to see more of her, you know, and not as like a stunt, not as an Oprah interview, not as a, you know what I mean? Like, I'd like to see her
Right.
work again, you know, because to me, I look at these two movies and I see, and even like we talked about, anything from her Child Time or fucking Mean Girls, or, you know, and there's a, not just a capable actress, but a very good actress, you know,
Yeah, good
maybe
to
even a
have on
great actress in
screen.
the right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and she's got a presence, and, you know, and there is a strange energy there. And I like her. So I wish this would have like jump started her career, but she's going to be albatrossing that whole, what I did in my 20s bullshit for a really long time, you know? And maybe she's
Yeah.
working and we don't know it. Maybe I just didn't bother fucking
Mhm.
Googling what Lindsay Lohan's doing in 2023, you know, but which is definitely the case.
Oh
So,
my
but
god. Did you see that like 2014 reality show with her and Oprah?
yeah,
Like it was just called like Lindsay. I was like
yeah, I was like,
I learned about that like rather recently and it like blew my mind watching some of those that I found online. They're just nuts. It's just like Oprah and a camera crew and like a whole TV show basically just made to like basically bully Lindsay for like chipping on her like alcoholism or whatever like every once in a while. And it's just like maybe it helped her. I don't know, but I
I
don't
don't know if
know.
it's
That was a bizarre thing to witness.
I don't know if it's bullying so much as like just it's kind of oddly enough shows that Oprah cares. She's like tough loving her. You know what I mean? Like, because
Mm-hmm.
maybe Oprah sees something in this girl that she can help her, or like, and the only way to help her is just treat her kind of badly to make her like realize like the error of her ways and try to give her a little bit of love here and there and stuff like that. So, and it just obviously didn't work, you know. So, which
She
is a bummer.
does.
But yeah,
She
what's
has
up?
like a Netflix deal now. So I think late
Yeah.
last year was some like Christmas romantic comedy
Yes, I
thing
saw
came
that.
out.
Well, I didn't see it, but I saw that it
Right.
exists. Yes,
And
I knew she
apparently
had a
she has
Netflix deal.
yeah, so she has, I think, at least one or two more in the pipeline. Maybe she'll find an audience with that. And, you know, she might be getting to a stage in her career, her age or something that it could be ripe for another. You know, it's been 10 years since the Canyons came out. So all it might take is for, you know, a Quentin Tarantino or somebody like that to give her a chance in, you know, a role. And it's been so far removed, I think, from that whole time period that of
Yeah.
what she was going through that people might even be excited to see, like, all right, let's see what an older, you know, Lindsay Lohan is bringing to the table, maybe with that baggage informing it. Yeah, I don't know.
You never know. It would be
I would be
awesome though. I
down.
would love to see it. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. You know, not anything like, it would just give her to do something that isn't like trauma based or like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm this fucked up person trying to, you know, because that's what somebody's going to write for. They're going to write some fucking
Sure.
stupid grief trauma movie, and she'll probably fucking kill it. But
Yeah.
there's something else going on there, man. You know, even just like seeing her in Prairie Home Companion or whatever, and
Yeah, just
you
let her
know,
be
and obviously
in a movie. Just let her be in a
just a
normal ass
normal ass
movie.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so anyways, I love Lindsay Lohan, apparently, because I just fucking talked to you guys 2 hours about her.
I think we all kind of do at the end
Yeah,
of
she
2 hours.
rules, man. So
Yeah, she emerged unscathed in our eyes from these two movies.
yes, absolutely. And
And
fuck anybody who
she's,
says
yeah,
it otherwise. So, you know, you could fucking find me at
absolutely.
Twitter at steakmountain.com and I'll argue with you.
Yeah, that is the end result. Yeah, she is
Yeah.
not the problem with any of these
Nope.
movies that we talked about.
She
That
is
is
not.
like the big like lesson where like she was often that is the problem that like
Mm-hmm.
stars are getting the brunt of this. Or also like I was talking with someone who's a friend of mine who works in like props and stuff, and it's just it's like a good lesson sometimes, and just like how much like even like as much as we talked about Bret Easton Ellis and Paul Schrader dropping the ball, like it's just like there's so many people that do so many things on like these movies. It's just like I don't know, like pointing the blame in one place or another is this weird sort of confusing thing to do, really.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a village, but really, they only want to see the most visible person to fucking burn them. You know what I mean? And in the case
Mm-hmm.
of this, it's Lohan. You know, it's not Schrader. It's
Mhm.
not Ellis. And the same thing with the fucking, you know, I Know Who Killed Me, you know? So, You know, they're not going after the guy who basically makes like direct-to-video fucking thrillers that just happen to get a movie star to be in his movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, a guy whose name we can't even fucking remember, you know, people are going to come after her. They're going to give her Razzies, and that's bullshit, dude. Because again, heightened performance, very good. So,
all right. So yeah, Lindsay, we have your back. Come on the show. We'll talk about whatever movies you want to talk about.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, and we'll have Chris back on too, so we can all have a love fest together.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, Chris, your new book is out October 10th. Is that the correct
10th
date?
Yep.
All right. The
10,
holy
10,
day.
23.
And we are looking forward to it. Thank you so much for spending this time with us and this great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for spending. You've been really generous.
Listen, thanks. No, thanks for having me on. And I was excited to talk about something that was a little off the beaten path. Like, yeah, I could have came on here and did Cannibal Holocaust, and really we would have killed that. But that's so on brand for me to be like, I'm going to talk about this Italian horror movie. You know what I mean? I liked that this was on your list because I wouldn't have thought of it. So when you sent me that list and these were on there, I was like, oh, fuck yeah, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. Because of I Know Who Killed Me had an impact on me and an influence on something that I'm spent 5 years fucking writing. You know what I mean? So it was cool. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me on. You know,
awesome. Is there anything else that you want to point people towards besides the book?
No, just my website is steakmtn.com, and that mountain is spelled MTN, like the national abbreviation, and not spelled out mountain like an asshole. You can also find me at all those, that tag at Instagram or Twitter or Threads now that exists, because that's a thing now. I don't post very much, and most of what I post is just buy my book because I'm in heavy promo mode right now. But that's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've got some art coming out here and there. I'm helping John Nix with his Justin Pearson documentary because we're going to do a Blu-ray of that. They're doing a Blu-ray of that. I did the cover for that. And
nice.
Yeah. So, and it's actually, it's like one of my favorite pieces I've done recently. It's very funny. So, and Justin's an old friend. So it was just nice to kind of be involved in that. And the Combatwoundedveteran discographies will be slowly rolling out over the next year, but I don't have a date for any of it yet because we're doing something kind of secret and funny with a tape that we found for the LP. So that's going to be hilarious.
Oh.
And yeah, it's actually really so silly. And but other than that, yeah, nothing. Just everybody buy my book. I hope you're not disappointed. If you are, well, then go fuck yourself.
Oh, we absolutely have to end on that.
Yeah. And then
well said.
Just no end music or anything.
Yeah,
Go
just
fuck yourself.
Goes on to the next podcast.
Done.
All right. Actually, save that as a drop too, so we can put that at the end of every episode.
Yeah, go fuck yourself.
Go fuck yourself.
I haven't added anything to the soundboard in a while. That's funny.
Unwatchables is produced by Tony Scarpitti, hosted by me, Marc Dottavio, and Seth Troyer, with artwork by Micah Kraus. You can find Seth and I on Letterboxd under Marc Dottavio and Sloth Troyer. You can also check us out at unwatchablespod.com for links to our Twitter and Instagram, or support us on Patreon for bonus content and to have a say in what we watch. Thanks for listening.